So this first session is on the 50,000-foot view, and I wanted to contrast our two generational perspectives on that. And so I'm going to start with you, Evan. And when you hear the phrase 50,000-foot view, what comes to mind?
Thank you so much, Louise. Contrast our views. I actually think that we're going to find that we have very similar views despite the generational gap. I actually wanted to start off by asking a question. Do you ever just forget to do something that's so integral to your life, but you just keep on forgetting to do it because there's so many things that are much more important than it? Well, in my case, I just keep on forgetting to cut my hair. And so I'm thinking about it now because I see that camera and I realize I'm in front of everybody and I look ridiculous, but I just keep on forgetting to cut my hair. And I'm going to go back to my office and I'm going to go deal with the crisis of the day, and I'm not going to remember to cut my hair unless something really, really, happens that makes me remember it's really important. And I think that that's actually very similar to a problem that we're having as a society and as a government right now, is that there's something so integral to the way that we operate that we just keep on pushing aside. Either we don't recognize it as a problem or we just don't have time or care to address it. And that big challenge, I think, is complexity. Learning how to address, tackle, manage complexity. And complexity defined in terms of the interactivity of events, the speed of events, the unpredictability of cause and effect. And I think that complexity is our greatest challenge as a generation. You said before that you think that my generation, our generation, gets it. And in a way, I think that's true. I think that, put this down, so I'll try to prevent the feedback. I think that's true. How's that? Better?
They'll probably be fine if you have them up and pointed away from each other.
Thank you. See, systems thinking is actually very relevant even in electronics. I think that we live our lives in terms of networking and communication and everything relevant to complexity, but the people who are at the top levels of government and our society right now are so immersed in the crisis of the day that they're having trouble focusing on upgrading the systems to be able to tackle the requisite complexity of the challenges they're facing. This is something that I learned when I was in college and recognized because I took a class. I was fortunate enough to take a class with my current boss and mentor, Leon Firth. Professor Firth was the National Security Advisor to Vice President Gore. And when Mr. Gore lost the election, he started up a project at the George Washington University called the Project on Forward Engagement. And the reason he was interested in doing this is because he was finding that things would hit his desk as national security issues that he thought either these issues weren't originally supposed to be national security issues, or they were things that were supposed to be so far out and they were coming to his desk so much faster than he was expecting them to, and that he was convinced that our government needed a better way to think long range and to think about contingencies and to think about planning across government to handle the speed and complexity of events. And I think at that point he didn't have the theoretical frame, and it's just so amazing that these theories of complexity and systems have been around for a really long time, and so he began teaching them and exploring them over the last 10 years. I was fortunate enough to take his class in 2006 and find, I had no idea really what I was interested in, what I wanted to do. Came to college looking interested in philosophy, and I did a philosophy degree and was focused on systems, but not necessarily recognizing how applicable it could be to real-world issues until I was fortunate enough to take Professor Firth's class.
Okay. Can I stop you there?
Oh, please do.
For a moment. So let me do the older generation version of that.
Oh, great.
So I first was introduced to systems thinking called general systems theory at the time in 1973. And at that time, the whole complexity theory world had not yet emerged. So I've been tracking the development of the systems thinking field for 4 decades. And for me, from the general systems background, I would frame the challenge that we face a little bit differently. I agree with you that the issue of complexity is at the heart of it, but for me, it is, let me anchor it in issues, okay? That I would suggest that the major systems of our planet are at or near the crisis point, or the, I'm sorry, I have a little fog brain from chemotherapy, so my language isn't as sharp as it could be, but crisis point isn't quite the word I want. We have major systems in failure mode, okay? Major systems in big time failure mode. And you don't need a PhD in national security to know this. You just can pick up any newspaper. And they are all interconnected. Our energy systems, our economic systems, our environmental systems, our political systems, nationally, globally, our educational systems, they're all in trouble. And I think they're in trouble because they're based on the wrong set of assumptions. I think they're in trouble because they're all based on Newtonian physics that says that everything is separate. And so we grew systems on the assumption that everything is separate. Even nation states are separate, right? Peoples are separate. You listen to some of the rhetoric coming out of our political world right now, and you hear separation thinking. It's us against them. And that isn't really how the world works. That isn't how natural systems are. Yes, there's competition in natural systems, but there's living systems could not exist without cooperation because everything is interconnected and complex. And I think we're facing a time when if we don't get it, we're going to be in big trouble. They're having a meeting this week about the whole economic structure of Europe. I mean, how much of a systemic failure can there be? It'll be global. You know, everything is global now. In fact, I don't even believe in the term national security anymore, because there is no such thing as national security without global security. So for me, the challenge is, yes, understand, respond to, deal with, flow with complexity within the context of understanding that our major systems are at an existential crisis point.
I think you're absolutely right that our systems are approaching system failure. Let me address a few things that you said. One is on national security. I think there's growing consensus that national security is much more than national defense. Previously, it's always been thought of as national defense, and new issues have had to be brought into that term, and the term is becoming so all-encompassing because it's about the security and the prosperity now of the nation, because we find that without prosperity, we're really at tremendous risk. Another thing you were talking about is Newtonian physics, and that things can be separated. And I would alter the term to isolated. The idea is that you can isolate different processes and say if this, then that, and know and predict with very good accuracy, you know, what the trajectory of an event is going to be. And of course, that's the foundation of economic theory, is that with all other things held constant, if this, then that. And I think that what we're finding is absolutely right. That is not how the world works. And all of our language and all of our models for thinking are based on that kind of thinking.
Plus our bureaucracies are based,
right.
All of our administrative structures are based on that thinking.
Exactly. And so actually that's the basis of the work that I'm supporting Professor Firth in doing in the project on forward engagement, is looking at ways that the bureaucracies can organize themselves without a new mandate, without new authorities, without new permission from Congress, without new money. Simple fixes that can be implemented quickly and easily by people who are running such a huge process. The last thing I want to say on that is I think that it's become very commonplace to talk about how complex the world is, and it's kind of become a bumper sticker slogan, but it has real profound meaning. I think it's not just that the world is so much more interconnected and that so much is happening. It's that so much is happening that's relevant and accessible to everybody, and so that small things that are happening in places so far away from from us here can have tremendous impact incredibly quickly. And I think that in looking, basically it's too much as a governance structure, especially the way we're structured. There's too much to try to do if we want to keep everything so secure as we once thought that we wanted to. There's a standard of living that everybody in the world now wants to achieve, and if we want to prevent, if complexity makes it more likely that bad things are going to happen, and if our threshold for bad things happening is so much lower, then we have a real huge challenge ahead of ourselves. And that's why I think learning how to manage and understand complexity is the most fundamental challenge today.